Hi, welcome back to my bench. Last time I talked about putting TVs in the houses. Now we're going to talk about getting the signal to that TV. And to do that, back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up, we needed an antenna. And there was an antenna on every chimney, practically in every house in the neighborhood. It was the only way to get a TV signal in. And what I've done here is I've put one on top of one of my houses. And you can see here I've added some strapping to it. Point around here a little bit. Added a strapping here to it, which is the offset piece that holds the antenna out, allows it to clear the side of the chimney. I've used, actually, in this case, some gold medal models antenna. They are, I think, absolutely fantastic. And these are HO, but they really aren't. As I've talked about many times before, it's what is it in your scale. Well, these are over 4 feet long in O scale, so they're perfectly good antennas as far as I'm concerned, and they look perfectly nice and like they should on top of my building here. This is an O scale MTH building. So don't always go by what the manufacturer says, go by what it looks like in your scale. I've said that several times before. The other thing I did was I went to my Micromark shear, and I took some 5/1000 brass, just thin stock here, it's almost paper thin, and I sheared off some 32nd inch pieces that are the strapping around that chimney. And that's what I did. I simply bent them around the chimney, then I took and I held them together and soldered them, and then bent them around. And I used a little specialized piece here. These are a clothespin, Clothespin is always made to be modified, and a modified man, and I used that then to hold on some 0090 washers, and I just picked some out of my stock here, and I put those on my masthead, and that, then we'll turn this around here so you can see it. There's a little washer right down here at the bottom, and that just gave me a bigger flat space then upon which to set the actual antenna itself. And then I took enough solder so that I could kind of bump over the top of this and lock it onto that washer. And I did a double similar to the one I showed you on top of the house. I've got two up here, one on top of the other, and this single one. And I've got 4 more of those made up, ready to go onto the other houses that I have here in my neighborhood. So I'll put all 4 of those up on top of the house, and then I'll have a forest of antennas that'll look just like it did back in the day. Now, obviously, what goes around comes around. That's an old saying, but it's really true. The antennas that I knew back in the 50s and 60s disappeared in the 80s and 90s, even in the early 2000s, because we had cable and we had satellite. And now everybody's kind of upset with the cost of cable and satellite, so they've gone back to antennas. I've done that. I've got an antenna on my house up here, and that's how I get my TV signals in. So kind of gone full circle. The only difference is the antennas that we have now, of course, look a little bit different than the big wedge-shaped ones that we had back in the 50s and 60s. So depending on the area you're looking at, be sure and look at the kinds of antennas that they used in those times. But if you're back in the 50s and 60s, maybe even the early 70s like I am, you really want to mount up these antennas. Now I'll show you one example here of an example I did on Trainmasters TV when I was working on the trailer court, which is down at the end of the street for this neighborhood. And it was hand-built. I scratch-built it by just simply soldering up a whole bunch of wires and putting them on. The only thing that I need to do now, and I will have to do it to this antenna. You can see that I did it to the trailer if you watched real closely there, and that is that I need to run a wire down from that antenna and down either across the ridge and down into the house, or down the roof and in underneath the eave. But some way or other I've got to run a wire. I'll use a piece of string that doesn't fray or doesn't ravel out, and I'll run that down and around and into my house so that we can get that signal into the house. In the meantime, I hope you'll go down to your train room, grab your throttle, and let your trains put a smile on your face until we meet again.